It is very hard for archaeologists to explain how that was done using purely leverage and mechanical advantage.
When Graham Hancock stepped into the silent corridors of Egypt's ancient stone sites, he wasn't expecting to question history itself. Yet the marks etched into the granite told a different story. They weren't rough or random, but smooth, deliberate, and impossibly precise, like the work of a machine rather than human hands. Scholars had long dismissed them as simple quarry marks, but Hancock saw patterns that defied conventional explanation. What he uncovered hinted at a lost chapter of human capability, one that challenged the timeline of technology and raised a haunting question. Were the ancients far more advanced than we've ever imagined? The impossible cuts that started it all. The mystery begins inside the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, where an unfinished granite sarcophagus sits quietly among the relics of Egypt's old kingdom. At first glance, it looks like any other ancient coffin, until you look closer. The inner chamber of the box, carved from a single block of red Aswan granite, bears tool marks so clean, so uniform, and so precisely aligned that they resemble the work of a modern industrial machine. Yet, according to official archaeology, this sarcophagus was shaped over 4,000 years ago using only copper tools, wooden hammers, and sand as an abrasive. For Graham Hancock, this single artifact raised a huge question. How could a civilization without iron or steel cut smooth and hollow out one of the hardest stones on Earth? Granite, which ranks about 6 on the Mohs hardness scale, while copper barely reaches 3. In simple terms, copper is too soft to bite into granite. At best, it can scratch its surface. But the sarcophagus's interior showed deep symmetrical curves and right angles that suggested some form of rotary cutting or mechanized drilling. Researchers studying the object noted perfectly circular striations of fine spiral lines wrapping around the interior, consistent with the path left by a high-speed rotating tool. These weren't random chisel marks or uneven abrasions. They were concentric and evenly spaced, as though the stone had been carved by a modern core drill or lathe. To test the theory, engineers and stoneworkers attempted to reproduce similar cuts using traditional copper tubes filled with quartz sand, as Egyptologists claimed the ancients did. The results were nowhere near as smooth or consistent. Even with maximum effort, it took hours to cut just a few millimeters deep. At that rate, finishing the sarcophagus's interior would have required months of non-stop drilling per inch. The energy, time, and precision needed simply didn't match the tools supposedly available at the time. Hancock wasn't the only one intrigued. British engineer Chris Dunn, who examined similar cores and sarcophagi, measured the rate of spiral descent on the drill marks. The results suggested an impossibly high feed rate, meaning the tool had moved through the granite faster than any copper drill could under human pressure. To achieve that, the tool would have needed consistent rotational torque, something powered and stable, possibly a mechanical or vibrational system unknown to modern archaeology. If true, it meant that whoever cut the sarcophagus had access to technology capable of controlling speed, pressure, and precision far beyond what primitive hand tools could do. Some researchers proposed that the Egyptians used bow drills or tubular drills with hard stone abrasives, but even then, the accuracy of the inner curves and the smoothness of the walls still didn't add up. The unfinished nature of the sarcophagus makes it even more revealing. It froze the process mid-work, showing raw evidence of how it was being shaped, capturing a forgotten technique in progress. For Hancock, this was the starting point, the proof that something about the mainstream story didn't fit. To uncover what really made these perfect cuts possible, he decided to examine the ancient drill holes themselves, where the fingerprints of lost technology might still remain. Granite under the microscope. In the early 1980s, a team of researchers at the University of Pennsylvania Museum set out to study Egypt's stonework using modern techniques. They concentrated on one crucial clue: the drill holes found in granite and basalt artifacts throughout Egypt, especially at Giza and Aswan. Rather than guessing how ancient artisans operated, the team made silicone molds of the holes and the stone cores left inside. These molds preserved the exact form and texture of the drill traces, letting scientists inspect them under a microscope without harming the original pieces. What they observed created more mysteries than solutions. The drill marks displayed even concentric ridges that circled smoothly around the cores. These ridges were not random scratches from uneven hand force. Even more surprising was that the spacing between the ridges slowly shifted along the length of the hole, indicating the drill's pressure or speed was adjusted during use. In modern manufacturing, that level of control requires equipment capable of maintaining steady torque and speed, not simple hand tools. Another major finding was the structure of the holes. They were not solid bore holes. Instead, the molds exposed hollow centers, proving that the ancient Egyptians used a tubular drilling method where a hollow tube, not a solid rod, cuts through the stone to create a circular core. Tubular drilling is common in modern engineering, but according to history, it was not developed until the 19th century. The idea that Egyptians could accomplish this over 4,000 years ago challenged everything archaeologists believed they understood about ancient technology. When scientists estimated the cutting rate from the spiral groove patterns, they were astonished. The evidence showed that the drill progressed about 0.1 inch per revolution. In simple words, with each turn of the drill, it carved 1/10 of an inch into solid granite. For comparison, even with diamond-tipped drills today, that is an impressive cutting rate. Copper tools, regardless of how much sand is added as an abrasive, cannot reach that speed without bending or melting under stress. Microscopic examination also showed that the striations were too exact to be produced by human hand pressure. The grooves followed a consistent rhythm, suggesting the drill did not wobble or slow down, which would only occur if it was driven by a steady source, such as a weighted system or rotary mechanism. These were not isolated tests. The same pattern appeared in various cores discovered across multiple sites, pointing to a standardized process rather than scattered trial and error. Over time, several experiments attempted to recreate these outcomes using copper tubes and quartz sand. None managed to equal the accuracy or cutting rate seen on the ancient cores. Even with modern recreations, researchers could barely scratch the granite surface after hours of effort, leaving coarse, uneven grooves. The ancient samples, in contrast, showed crisp, smooth walls with uniform spiral marks from beginning to end. That uncertainty and the failure to duplicate the results drove both scientists and independent researchers to investigate further into the one missing part of the mystery: the tool's techniques. Archaeologists have uncovered several examples of ancient Egyptian drilling and carving tools over time. The most frequent discoveries include copper tube drills, bow drills, dolerite pounders, and abrasive sandstone blocks. These were the recognized tools believed to have been used during Egypt's Old and New Kingdom eras for shaping granite, quartzite, and basalt, some of the hardest stones on Earth. However, when these tools are examined under controlled testing, they cannot create results that match the precision visible in ancient artifacts. To account for this, some researchers have suggested that the Egyptians may have relied on abrasive substances such as emery, corundum, crushed quartz, or sandstone slurries alongside their copper drills. These abrasive grains, when combined with water, could theoretically wear down the stone surface, while the copper served as a soft guiding support. This approach does create wear patterns similar to those observed on certain limestone and softer stone objects. However, granite and basalt are far tougher. The abrasives would rapidly dull, and the copper would warp under stress long before forming deep, smooth cuts. Some archaeologists think the Egyptians may have advanced the idea further by embedding hard mineral grains directly into the drill edges, forming a kind of composite instrument. This would involve pressing or attaching small crystals of quartz or corundum into a copper or wooden tube, transforming it into a primitive version of a modern diamond-tipped bit. However, so far, no physical artifact has been discovered to confirm this. There are no drill bits with embedded abrasives preserved in museum archives or excavation reports. The support for such tools is entirely indirect, drawn from the microscopic grooves on stone surfaces. Graham Hancock, however, views this absence as significant. He contends that if the Egyptians truly used copper tools for such widespread work, some damaged examples should have remained, especially considering how many granite sites are present. Instead, most of the recovered drills are small and seem appropriate only for soft stone or wood. Hancock proposes that perhaps the actual drill materials were reused or crafted from organic substances that did not endure over time, such as hardwood shafts coated with mineral slurries or stone tubes strengthened with unknown binding compounds. Another explanation focuses on the mechanics behind the process. Some engineers note that to achieve the depth and accuracy seen in ancient holes, the drilling motion needed to be steady and continuous. This might have been accomplished through weighted drilling systems, where a fixed mass pushed the drill downward while it rotated steadily, a design similar to early lathes. This would maintain constant pressure and enable deeper cutting into the granite. Although no ancient Egyptian lathe has been uncovered, artistic scenes from tombs depict craftsmen using ropes, pulleys, and bows to spin tools, suggesting that such principles were known. Even so, no experiment using these reconstructions has equaled the exact quality of the ancient cores. Modern replicas come close, but still create uneven striations and inconsistent hole widths. This gap continues to perplex specialists and strengthens Hancock's claim that Egypt's craftsmen may have inherited or rediscovered methods from a lost technological heritage. But to understand how sophisticated this mysterious technique truly was, we must look at where these drilling methods were used across Egypt's hardest monuments and most sacred locations. Secrets hidden in the quarries of Aswan. The clearest physical evidence of ancient Egyptian stone-cutting techniques appears in the granite quarries of Aswan, a city near the present border of Sudan. This region provided most of the granite used in Egypt's temples, obelisks, and statues, including some of the largest structures ever attempted in the ancient world. The most well-known example is the unfinished obelisk, a huge monument that still remains partly connected to the quarry bed. Archaeologists think the obelisk was ordered by Hatshepsut around 1478 BC. If finished, it would have risen about 42 meters tall, nearly 137 feet, and weighed close to 1,200 tons, one-third larger than any other obelisk ever raised in Egypt. However, the stone fractured during construction, forcing workers to leave it behind. This created an almost perfect record of the quarrying process preserved in time. The walls and floor of the trench around the obelisk display parallel grooves and smooth curved channels. These markings are not random. They follow tidy, consistent paths, as if shaped by a directed tool rather than by uncontrolled hammering. Archaeologists usually credit these marks to dolerite pounding balls, rounded stones made from a similarly hard volcanic rock used to chip the granite surface. More than 30 such pounding balls have been discovered at the Aswan site, reinforcing this explanation. However, when the details are carefully reviewed, questions appear. The narrow trench of the unfinished obelisk makes it extremely difficult to swing tools properly, and repeated pounding could easily cause the stone hammers to crack. This gap between theory and observation led engineer Christopher Dunn to examine the quarry marks closely. In his book Lost Technologies of Ancient Egypt, Dunn explains that the smooth, scooped surfaces inside the quarry do not match random hand striking. Instead, they look like mechanical abrasion traces, similar to what a modern cutting wheel or high-speed grinder would leave. Some channels even bend beneath the body of the obelisk, forming undercuts that would be impossible to make with handheld pounding stones. Dunn determined that the quarry surfaces reveal signs of controlled directional force, possibly involving rotary or vibrational movement. He observed that even with current tools, creating those exact curved grooves would require equipment capable of angle-controlled rotation and steady torque. Graham Hancock agrees with this interpretation, proposing that the marks may reflect an advanced, or at least forgotten, method used by ancient craftsmen who were far more technically skilled than historians usually believe. Egyptologists remain careful, holding to the view that repeated hammering and sand abrasion could have formed these patterns over time. Yet even among conventional scholars, the Aswan site presents challenging questions. Why are the grooves so consistent? Why are certain surfaces smooth instead of rough and pitted? And how could workers accurately shape a 1,200-ton stone using only hand tools? These contradictions are what Hancock describes as the fingerprints of lost technology. To him, the quarry does not simply reveal Egyptian talent. It suggests they were continuing a body of knowledge that already existed. That idea gained further support when similar precise cuts and tool marks began appearing not only in Aswan, but throughout Egypt's temples and pyramids, from Giza to Luxor. Hancock's theory, a forgotten technology remembered. Graham Hancock's central claim about Egypt's mysterious granite craftsmanship revolves around a clear but daring idea. The precision seen in ancient Egyptian stone cutting did not originate in Egypt. He argues it was inherited knowledge from an earlier advanced civilization that lived before the close of the last ice age, roughly 12,000 years ago. According to Hancock, this unknown society developed refined engineering methods that were later transmitted through survivors who assisted in rebuilding early cultures like Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Indus Valley. In his view, the Egyptians were not the creators of precision stonework. They were the inheritors of a structured set of skills and techniques whose beginnings had already faded from history. Hancock highlights physical clues that he believes strengthen this perspective. Across multiple ancient locations, not only in Egypt, but also in South America and India, there are comparable tool signatures that modern investigators find difficult to clarify. For instance, tubular drill holes with spiral grooves appear in the granite quarries of Aswan, the stone platforms of Pumapunku in Bolivia, and certain monolithic temples in southern India. These places are separated by thousands of miles and vast stretches of time. Yet the same features emerge: deep circular cuts, precisely fitted stone joints, and surfaces polished to almost modern standards. He maintains that this repeated precision suggests a shared engineering legacy that may have begun before written records. Rather than imagining futuristic devices, Hancock proposes this lost technology may have depended on advanced mastery of abrasives, pressure, and geometry. He also suggests that many ancient builders might have been copying techniques they did not completely understand. Over generations, the scientific reasoning behind those practices could have faded into ritual or custom. Ancient craftsmen may have followed sacred guidelines passed down from ancestors or legendary gods, unaware they were safeguarding remnants of a once fully understood technology. This could explain why Egyptian workers achieved remarkable precision without leaving behind complex machines or instruments. Hancock's position faces strong criticism. Egyptologists and engineers respond that there is no solid proof of a pre-Egyptian civilization equipped with advanced machinery. They argue that ancient artisans accomplished their achievements through determination, abrasive materials like quartz sand, and straightforward but ingenious methods relying on manpower and repetition. Still, even within mainstream scholarship, there is acknowledgement that some tool marks, such as those on granite cores and the surfaces of the unfinished obelisk, do not entirely align with what copper and sand alone could achieve. This divide between explanation and evidence sustains the debate. For Hancock, that divide is the evidence itself. He interprets it as the lingering sign of a forgotten age of builders who once mastered stone shaping with unmatched accuracy. For years, the conversation remained theoretical until recent scientific examinations returned to these granite cores and quarries, generating findings that questioned both sides of the discussion. The proof in the stone, the Serapeum at Saqqara, reveals the truth. Hidden beneath the sands of Saqqara lies evidence that seems to defy logic. It is called the Serapeum of Saqqara, an enormous underground structure carved through solid limestone, containing granite boxes so massive and refined that even modern engineers stop in amazement. The boxes are believed to weigh about 70 tons each, shaped from single blocks of black granite. According to Egyptologists, this complex was constructed during the rule of Khaemweset in the 13th century BC to function as burial chambers for sacred Apis bulls. But when researchers and engineers such as Graham Hancock, Christopher Dunn, and members of the Kemet school studied the details, they believed the evidence suggested something very different. The surfaces of these granite boxes are astonishingly exact. Chris Dunn chose to measure their accuracy with high-precision instruments. What he discovered questioned every belief about ancient stone craftsmanship. The inner walls of the boxes were not only polished to a mirror-like shine, but also level within thousandths of an inch, a standard of precision normally associated with modern machine manufacturing. The corners were flawlessly square, and the interior edges so sharp that a finger could easily be cut by sliding along the line. When Dunn compared these boxes to others located in Khafra's pyramid, he observed something remarkable. The precision matched exactly. The boxes inside the Serapeum displayed the same workmanship as those produced more than 1,000 years earlier. Yet, according to accepted timelines, Egyptian stonework should have declined by that era. Even more revealing, the dating of the Serapeum boxes relied on pottery fragments discovered nearby, not on the boxes themselves. This leaves open the possibility that their true age may be much older than scholars currently claim. Hancock proposed that these boxes were not funerary containers at all. Their polish, balance, and geometry imply they served another, possibly technological or energetic function. The boxes appear engineered rather than artistically shaped, as if their creators followed detailed plans instead of creative impulse. Their purpose may have involved sound, vibration, or energy resonance, since their placement deep within limestone corridors suggests an intentional design meant to interact with the surrounding earth. There are no visible tool marks that align with copper chisels or pounding stones. Instead, microscopic analysis reveals spiral traces indicating the use of a high-speed rotary cutting device that should not have existed in ancient Egypt. This extraordinary precision, together with the absence of convincing tool evidence, has turned the Serapeum into one of the strongest cases for advanced ancient technology. For Hancock, it stands not merely as a tomb, but as tangible proof of a lost civilization's engineering mastery preserved in stone.